Right, well, that's two really good presentations so far. It's a hard act to follow, I must admit. All those big words, I won't be using any fancy words on mine, I tell you, mainly because I can't say them. Mine basically focuses on what it's like to be a working class lad in a higher education system, a system that for me is a domain of the middle class. Well, certainly when I started, it was. It's quite diverse now, but not as diverse as it should be. And what I want to do is explore not just my own experiences, but my experiences of those people I've actually taught at master's level, as well as undergraduate level, and the value of a degree within those people, specifically working class people returning to marginalised areas and areas of social exclusion. So just to start off with, I'm just going to give you a rundown of my background. I was a child living in the 80s. I was born on an estate. I still live in the same house as I was born in. I grew up in the 80s in living in probably what was one of the worst council housing estates in Liverpool. It was called Council Farm. It's now called Stockbridge Village. It went through a rebranding exercise in the 1980s. 1980s Liverpool, obviously, if anyone who's a student of urban studies would know, you had high levels of unemployment, urban decline, poverty, high levels of crime, and as such, it was bordering toward what Thatcher was planning on what was called managed decline. In other words, it was about to be written off completely. It was a non-entity. Thanks to the European Social Fund, I don't regard myself as British as such. I regard myself as European, because it was thanks to the European Social Fund that gave me my education. And I'll always be glad for that, and I'll always be grateful for them. And Brexit to me is just sacrilege, to be honest. And anyone that goes through with Brexit, when you grow up with in the area that I grew up with, you valued what Europe gave you in terms of the European Social Fund. So basically, my formal education started in 1989. Passed a local FE college, popped in to find out what was going on courses. I thought, yeah, I've always been a bit studious, so I'll have a go at doing a couple of GCSEs. A few years later, I ended up with 7 GCSEs and 3 A levels. Obviously, that started to get my motivation started. So I thought, right, why not do a degree? 1995, I graduated with a combined honours degree in psychology and sociology. 1998, an MA in social policy and social work followed. 1999, again, thanks to the European Social Fund, I actually got paid for this one. So I was quite pleased signing on. I signed off and got paid a bit, an ESF, European Social Fund bursary for this one, MSc in applied psychology. Great. And I thought, surely now this can break the cycle. But no, there was still high levels of unemployment. I was still shifting around like Craig. I did a stint in the army as well, but there was nothing. Then I managed, again, thanks to the European Social Fund, postgraduate certificate in clinical and forensic psychology. Now, by this time, I was really getting into the academic sting of things, and I enjoyed academia. And aesthetically, it wasn't giving me anything again financially. I was still in the same position. But aesthetically and the thirst for knowledge at that point, I wanted to do a PhD. I wanted to finish. I'm a great collector, and if I do collect things, I like to finish my collection. And for me, the PhD, it's 10 years it took me to actually scramble some funding together, sending out emails, what I call mad email days, scratch card moments. 9 times out of 10, you get you're a loser, but just one chance you might get that bite. Well, fortunately, I got it from Merseyside Police, as well as the University of Chester, who waived my PhD fees, as well as providing me with £8,000 funding. It was matched by Merseyside Police, and I lived for that for 3 years, throughout the PhD in criminology, and I actually graduated in 2018. Obviously, in terms of publications, 20 publications followed. A monograph, an academic monograph based on the PhD is due to be published in August in 2020, provided I proofread correctly, of course. Professional development training includes 20 diplomas and certificates in various topics, including postgraduate diploma in offender profiling and crime scene analysis. What is the sum total of the reward of this? Still a sessional. sessional since 2004 after all of that. And it really has made me question the value of a degree, not just to me personally, but for other people. Because what I've found is that other students that I've taught over the last 4 years, certainly at John Moores in Justice Studies, they're having the same problems. Because recently I've done references for master's students with distinction, with merits, and it was for posts. And these are mature students with a lot of life experience, as well as experiences within other aspects. And it's a case of retail assistant at Moss Bros, Betfred, and Boots cashiers. And these are people who've invested a lot of time and a lot of money. And it's got me to question the value of a degree to working class individuals. Now, I live in an area, like I say, I lived in an area called Cantrell Farm, Stockbridge Village, which is based in Knowsley. And when I say the value of a degree to working class individuals, I'm talking about individuals who are going back to what's billed as socially excluded as areas, marginalised areas. Knowsley is high up, really high up in terms of marginalisation around the UK. And I think it's the 5th at this to date, might be the 2nd now, most deprived area in the UK. And this quote I saw in The Guardian 2017 sums it up even today. Knowsley is the top and bottom of every British economic and social league table you'd be anxious to avoid. Brexit, like I say, strangely enough, the residents during the Brexit referendum voted out, which I think that's a travesty, considering the amount of money that Europe poured into Liverpool during the 80s, and Knowsley as well, and the opportunities it generated. And it's sadly not going to be there anymore. And that's what's going to make it more concerning about the fate of Knowsley itself, where it's actually going. It was also the first British local authority to stop offering A-levels. This has now come back, but it's come back on a very limited resource. I think it's Carmel College who offer just A-level provision now. My absolute passion in terms of debate, I've been debating with the local MP for 15 years now over this. There is no support in the borough and in other boroughs in Merseyside for graduates returning to the marginalised areas, unemployed graduates. The argument is, oh, you've got the skills, you don't need any support. But if the opportunities are not there, you can have all the skills you want. The opportunities need to be there, the kickstart, and there is nothing. I mean, it's all prioritized to those people who have no skills and no qualifications. God knows, yet they do need it. But we also talk about inclusivity within boroughs, and graduates should be included. They need to be identified. They cannot identify as being a graduate and being working class because there's no outlet for them to do so. So what happens is the local councils talk about, oh, there's no role models. We've got no role models. This is what the situation is. But they do have role models because you've got pockets of graduates going back to these areas, Knowsley in particular, but you're doing nothing with them. Instead, what you're doing is you're bringing in football celebrities from the world of football, like Steven Gerrard. I'm a Liverpool supporter, great player, fantastic talent. He's not a role model because he's got £100,000, £200,000 a week. That's unrealistic goal setting. He's not a role model. So these are the people that you need to utilize. It's not happening. Instead, what's happening is they end up on like me, Job Centre Plus, with job coaches saying, "Oh, you've got a degree." In your case, they see my CV. The job coach just has a fit. Well, you need to make these disappear because you're not going to get a survival job. And this is it's quite concerning. Just to narrow in where I live on Knowsley, these are just some of the images of Stockbridge Village and Cantrell Farm. Some of you may know it. I don't know if there's any overseas delegates. It would be interesting to know if any overseas delegates have similar experiences when they leave with a degree or two. The picture in the corner is a derelict pub called the Barleymow, which I live exactly across, about literally 5 yards from. It's now been demolished, but you can see some of the issues that have been associated with the estate. It's a typical estate. It is starting to improve now, but it still hasn't moved on, so to speak. But So, but then we get to the argument, well, if you don't like this, where it's the Trump argument at the moment, well, if you don't like this administration, why don't you, just leave the country? Well, I often get that, well, why are you moaning about what you are? Why don't you just leave? Well, there are arguments about that. And these are my points, really. This is my response. First off, if you want to leave somewhere, then you've got the vicious funding circle. So in order to leave somewhere, you need money to start off in the first place, because you need the finances to relocate. And how can you get the income if you haven't got employment? Then you've got the argument of basic economics. Identify a more affluent area. Well, yeah, if you find an area that has proper graduate employment that can get a value out of your degree opportunities, good luck to you. You probably won't at this moment in time. We have no social mobility in this country. We never have. I'm sorry, but I've looked for it and I can't find it. If you actually find one of these areas, then you'll find that it's a higher cost of living, because products and services are at higher level, because there is a great deal of employment, so the cost of living will go up. So this will be added further to your initial relocation and long-term living costs. Then there's the third argument. Why should people relocate? I mean, part of their location, their residence, their place is part of their identity as well. Why should they, uplift and move their roots because of government failure to create better social mobility? So what of other social excluded graduates leaving university today? That's just a bit about me. I want to expand it. Like I say, I've had reference requests over the last couple of years from students with first-class honours degrees, MA graduates at distinction and merit, and they've been for jobs like Moss Bros, tailors, retail assistants, Betfred, and boot cashiers and boots. Which, don't get me wrong, these jobs are real for the people involved with them. They work their socks off, and they are to be respected. But in the same context, you've got people paying a lot of money now for a decent education, and they want at least something that they can utilize their skills in, but it's not happening.
There's 3 minutes left, Robert.
Okay, a simple online search can reveal the truth. Many graduates returning to social exclusion simply end up at the door of the job centre with a degree or two. This in turn leads to the question of, is it worth it? Just to give you some quick stats. Statistics from the Higher Education Academy reveal that over 60,000 university leavers were in non-professional jobs that could have been obtained without a degree. Further, 6 months after leaving university, a third of graduates who actually found employment are taking jobs such as cleaners and sweepers. Just to get on to do my last slide, focusing on what a specific career, particularly becoming a working class academic. I know there are quite a few people who are interested in doing that, but the problem is, first and foremost, you need a PhD, as Lewis probably found out. PhD costs money. In the UK, it's either pay for yourself, as Lou did, find some form of sponsorship, as I did, or apply to one of the research councils, which is a lottery at the moment, and it's still dominated by the middle classes. Secondly, for the majority of full-time teaching and research contracts at a university, you've got research publications, publish or perish. Not only that, but such publications need to be ideally recognised by what we call Research Excellence Framework, REF. They have to be REF recognised. Thirdly, in some universities now, it's a case of looking at a candidate, as I got recently when I went for an interview, is not just the publications, but the publishing houses and the quality of those publishing houses. They are now being invested. These are just some of the barriers you're up against, even when you get a PhD and you go for interview for an academic post. And fourthly, you've got the threat of internal candidates. Now, here's an idea, as Lou, I want to pick up on what Lou said, that in FE, further education, there is a lot of working class and very good tutors, as I found out, obviously coming through the FE system as a student. Why can't we create a pathway for FE via FE into HE for working class people to develop a career in higher education through the further education route? Why should they have to be, apply to this goal mark of PhD? This is a possible, I think of a higher education teaching apprenticeship through further education. It's an article that I am now writing for the Times Higher Education Supplement. And just to summarize, there are a lot of issues within this within this, is it worth a debate? But summarizing this in general context, marginalised graduates have become the epitome of what it's like to be a victim within exclusion, well, exclusion within exclusion. In other words, they go back to an excluded environment, but they are further excluded because there's no support for graduates or anyone with any qualifications. In the meantime, we have government ministers and local councillors who continue to moan about the lack of role models in excluded communities as an excuse of high rates of crime and deprivation, while at the same time ignoring the very individuals who could help kickstart deprived areas. The end result, marginalised graduates left to waste away, starved of support, their motivation fading forever to remain in communities such as Knowsley on the road to nowhere. And finally, thanks for that. Questions?
Excellent. Thanks for that, Robert. That was great. Again, there's been a hive of kind of comments and questions taking place. One of the most popular in relation to what you've said is in relation to FE colleges and the role of FE colleges, because you mentioned this in relation to your own journey, kickstarting your own journey.
Yeah, it did.
So what could be done differently, do you think, on that front?
I think that there should be, you know, FE, I'm a friend of mine who works in FE college as a tutor, works really hard. They get bombarded with multiple modules, a lot more modules than we do in HE. And there's a lot of highly experienced and knowledgeable people. But what I've noticed is there's a lot of working class people as FE tutors. Why can't we have this as a route into HE? Because there are a lot of FE tutors who have the potential to become really good academics and researchers at higher education. Some FE colleges like Hugh Baird do the foundation part for the degrees. John Moores are working with Hugh Baird as well. I think policing and LCAPs, they're collaborating. Here's one possible avenue. Why do we have to go? It took me only over 10 years to get a PhD. That's ridiculous. And it's this gold standard that needs, and it's a gold standard that's more accessible for people from a middle class background than it is working class background, and that's wrong. And this is where we've got a barrier of lack of social mobility within the educational sector. And FE would be an ideal route to actually to get working class people and make higher education more diverse, because you've got a lot of really good working class academics, and I'm going to use academics because that's what they are in FE, and they should be brought through. And this would be an ideal path to bring them through and say, right, well, there's a funded PhD, you can do that as well. We have GTAs at John Moores, as you know, graduate teaching assistantships. Create more and use that path. There's your apprenticeship, there's your roots in FE, and then it's a transitional process, isn't it?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Absolutely. One other question, and we might need to move on to the next speaker after this one. But any thoughts on how to better prepare working class students when they leave HE?
Yeah, I think, again, we've got to have local support. We've got to have a collaboration. Obviously, John Moores have what's called the WOW project, and lots of universities have careers who try to prepare students. But I think there's going to be a lot more focus on where people are actually going back to the areas. And this is where the local authorities can do something. I mean, we've got in Merseyside, we've got Working Links, Liverpool works, Knowsley works, but they do nothing. They were funded by Europe, they're now funded by the local authorities, but they don't focus on graduates as well. It should be inclusive, and that's wrong. There should be some support with the local authorities linking in with the universities. I was involved with the Vice Chancellor's office and the business school at John Moores on a project that was looking at how John Moores could extend their footprint in areas like Knowsley. And I got a lot of people, including a couple of politicians, around the table. And my own politician, George Howard, summed this up, because I've been debating this this subject with him for the last 15 years. And he said, the problem is no one was listening to you. They don't want to know about graduates going back to working class areas because they've got skills. They want to just focus on, they just want to pathologize the issue. But this needs to be recognized, and local authorities should have more input in terms of identifying what people are coming back with degrees and how they can actually support their communities with the skills they've got, instead of just allowing them their skills to die off. That's my point.